Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you a effect you can use for lots of game objects inside of, I guess, Unity, but whatever game engine you're using. This is going to be a quick tutorial, and you will need your game engine of choice, ideally Unity, because this will be in C Sharp, and Blender. So let's get to it. So the effect looks kind of like this. There are several different things you can use this for. It really just has a trigger you can set whenever you want, but I have it here set to velocity. So when the object hits something at a high enough velocity, it will shatter and then it can clean itself up. So we're going to go over from scratch how to get our object ready, how to shatter it, and then how to do all the scripting for it. So to start, we're going to go into Blender. I just have a default scene pulled up over here, and you can see when I hit the cube and go to my search option, there is an option called make sure you have self-extra turned on inside of your add-ons, and then you should be ready to go. It's going to save my preferences so that I don't have to do that next time. So with your cube selected, you're going to hit F3 and then open up self-fracture by typing in here. And it will give you this menu. Noise controls how uniform it is. If you have it turned to 0, it will make a very uniform break. If you have a lot of noise, it's going to shatter it randomly as what we want. So I'm going to do onverts and noise to 1. And the rest of the options you can kind of explore on your own. But that will give us this. It gives us the original cube and all the pieces. So we're going to take all the pieces, select them all. I'm going to export them as an FBX. And I have my operator preset set for Unity. Just make sure you have selected objects and then these transform options as well. So that's good. I'm going to set this as cube frac for fractured. And then the original as well. File, export, cube whole. And make sure that your export settings for both these objects are the same. And we're going to put that whole cube into the scene here. Oh, do the scene. There we go. Okay, so now that we have the cube, I'll turn this face off. We need to make sure it has a rigid body. So I'm going to add a rigid body. And a collider. Not a mesh collider for now. I guess a box would be the smarter one, right? Okay, so we got both of these things onto our cube. I'm going to head and add an object or a component on here. It's going to be a script called break. And we'll go over what this does. And then you're also going to, oh yeah, so I guess let's open up the script. So inside of here, we want this script basically to shatter the object when we give it a trigger. And then I'm setting that trigger for now as a velocity trigger. So you can have it as whatever you'd like. Otherwise, just set it for velocity is usually the option I see often. So we're going to need several variables. We're going to need a Boolean for whether or not it breaks, how much velocity you want to cause the break in the object, and then the broken version of the object. And then for a private, we need a rigid body, so we don't call it that often. We're just going to get it here on start. And then we have our shatter void here. So what this does is it first set the collider of the object to false so that all of the child objects, which will be spawned in place, don't collide with it when it's creating them. Then it gets the velocity of the rigid body and it instantiates the broken version of the object with this exact position and rotation. And there's no option for scale, so we're just going to set that right here just to make sure. So if this scale, if this object's been scaled, that the other version gets scaled correctly as well. And then you're going to have a for each transform here. So what this does is it looks at the broken vase transform, and it looks at each child. So if we go back here to Unity and look at the cube broken version here, I guess let's bring it in as a prefab. You can see here that it has all these cells as child objects. So it's going to go through this list of childs and apply something to each of them. And what it's going to do is it's say get the rigid body of it, add the force of velocity, which is this object's velocity, and it's going to be in the velocity change mode, which is just a sudden change in velocity. It basically just sets it. And then once that's done, it's just going to go ahead and destroy the original. So that's our shatter method. And then we want to get a trigger for that, which is going to be this on collision enter. So we're going to say if it's set to break on impact and the magnitude of the original object's velocity is greater than the velocity needed to break it, trigger that shatter. And we can go back into Unity, and on the original, I'm gonna give it a sec. There we go. So in the original, we need to set a prefab. We don't want to set this cube frac model because it is a prefab kind of, but it's also just technically a model. So we're going to drag it in here, get our model ready to go, and then we're just going to drag it back out and create a prefab of it. Cube frac prefab. So now that we have this prefab, we can go to, you can delete this in the scene, you don't need it anymore. We can click the original one, and inside the script, we're going to do assets, cube frac prefab. So that will spawn this object. And then we're going to go into that prefab. And we're going to add another script. Let me see what I called it. Broken object controller. So we're going to add another script onto this, which is going to take care of all of the cleanup for this object. And if we go ahead into the script here, you can see what it does. So we're going to give it a time. This is how long each of the fragments of this object are going to survive once they've been created. So you can set this as you want. It's just good to set things as you need. List of all the child bodies in here. We just need all their rigid bodies because we're going to be affecting them here. I'm using Dark Souls as a reference for this. It has a very good cleanup system, and I'll go over it as we talk about the script. So we have a timer. It's just used to keep track after the thing has been created. And then there's a Boolean, which makes sure we can kind of like, it's kind of like a pseudo initialize way to do. It's kind of like, yeah, it's just like a way to initialize things. So let's take a look at the start. And in the start, we're going to get a list of all child rigid bodies by doing the same thing as the transform child as before. So we're going to add every rigid body that is inside of this child list. And the reason for that is so we don't have to get this component later. We just want to get it once. You want to limit the number of times you get component whenever you can because it's a heavy operator. And then I just like to print the count of this. We don't technically need it, so all you need from here is say after start equals true, telling the rest of the script that it's done its initialization. So inside of fixed update, because we're dealing with rigid bodies, we're going to go through each thing here. So we have timer is plus equal delta time. And what this does is count the timer up each frame. So as time goes, it counts up. Pretty simple. Then we're going to tell it if the timer is over 1 and there's no child rigid bodies left, aka if all of the objects inside of this transform have been deleted, then we're going to destroy this. And I just have a cleanup message here. You don't need that, but it's optional. Then the main thing here is this for each. So each frame, it's going to say for each child rigid body, if start has finished and it has been more than 1 second, if the velocity of this piece equals 0, set the kinematic option on its rigid body to true. And what this basically means is after a second of this thing existing, if any of the pieces come to a halt, like they stop moving in the world, it will then turn their collisions off. This is just a nice way to clean things up. If you notice, the same thing happens in Dark Souls. If you crash through a chair, it will, jiggle around and the pieces will shatter and collide with each other. But once they have settled, they don't get moved anymore. And it's a good way to optimize the amount of load you can have on your game. So that takes care of the rigid body toggling. And then in here, we're going to say if the timer is longer than the amount of lifetime for the fragments. And this is also a plugin we're going to be using, Lean Tween. So go ahead, I'll just go over that real quick. If you don't already have Lean Tween and you're inside of your Unity project, once this loads, you're going to go ahead and open up the package manager inside of the window option here. So window, package manager, and then you have to add this. I'll add a link in the description, but you're going to want Lean Tween on this project. So make sure that you have that inside of here. Let's see, where is it? Lean Tween, I guess I gotta load all of them. But yeah, I'll put the description for it. Just yeah, make sure that you add this into your project so that you can use it. But yeah, so now we get access to some of these operators. So you can say if Lean Tween is tweening, and I'll go over this in a second. So basically, let's start with just this. If the timer is longer than the amount of time in the fragment to life, so if it's been over 5 seconds, as we have it set in our prefab here, it's going to say scale each rigid body to 0 and take 1 second to do that. The set ease out expo is just an animation curve. You can set different ones. If you set it to bounce, they'll kind of scale down and then back up a little bit until they eventually bounce out of existence. There's different options you can use. I just like expo. And then set on complete, and this nonsense here. Basically, this is going to say when the tweening is complete, do this. So delegates needed here, and then you'd have your method here. So basically, you can say, okay, lean tween, cancel the animation, so it's not going to scale to 0 once it hits that point. Remove this child from the list we created earlier, and then destroy this child. So it's going to scale it down, clean it out of the parent object, and then destroy it. The reason we have a lean tween is tweening here is we don't want to be doing this if it's already animating right here. So this would make it so that if we just had this, it would try to do this every frame after 5 seconds, but this will keep it clean so it doesn't cause any errors or run into itself. So that's all the logic of the script, and we can go ahead and see that in practice now. So I have my parent object. I'm going to set break in on impact. Velocity is going to equal 1, and I'll put it up here. And if we hit start here, oh yeah, I forgot. We actually need a rigid body for all the fractured pieces. That's important. So yeah, go to all your child objects here, and you're going to add a collider. So I'll add a mesh collider, and I'll add a rigid body. Very cool. And we'll save that out and go back. So clear this, and let's take a look. Okay. I'll solve this here and come back in 1 moment. Sorry about that, guys. I found out what it is. You have to set the collider to be convex. If there's a mesh collider, you just can't have it not convex if you have a rigid body attached to it. Not sure why, but it should be fixed now. Let's take a look. And there you go. So this is a pretty simple script. Got the whole cleanup, and you can see here, after we're done, nothing is left. The original cube is gone, and the destroyed one, which keeps the load light. There is a lean tween operator here, but that's fine, because if there's any other things in the scene that use lean tween, they can attach to this. So that's everything. I hope that this was informative. I'm going to leave a link to lean tween in the description, and let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.